When the boss is talking, I'll call this meeting in order. We'll stand for the pledge. I think Kimberly's out of the country is my understanding, so that's why I am here. I'll entertain a motion to approve today's agenda.
So moved.
Neil,
Second.
Bruce, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Seeing no action items, we'll turn to the study session. And first up is the AT-PPS Annual Report.
Hello, I'm Kathy Bauman. I teach sixth grade science at Southwest, and then also am the district coordinator for AT-PPS. So, just to give you a little bit of history, this might look familiar to some of you, but it's the Alternative Teacher Performance Pay System, which is our QComp system that we're a part of. And it's our 20th year that we've participated in this. And I'll let you take a look through the purpose and components that we work through. Our individual growth plan is probably a huge component, actually, of our system for our licensed staff to be able to help kind of grow professionally in our craft and benefit our students. What it's made up of in terms of teacher leader positions is myself, the district coordinator. There's 8 coordinators or instructional coaches, and then 41 or up to 41 instructional team leaders, which would be like individuals within individual buildings that help make up their instructional leadership team. Job embedded professional development, so we meet every Wednesday for a total of 34 Wednesdays throughout the school year in our PLCs, and that's for 45 minutes. It can involve anything to do with standards aligned curriculum, instruction assessment. It could be also some book studies that have to do with whatever teachers are working on that year and what their goals are. Analyzing student data, making changes to assessment work. The 4 critical questions that we cover, and I always put +1 because we add in our Marzano work as well. What do we want students to learn? How will we know when they've learned it? How will we respond when learning has not occurred? And how will we respond when learning has already happened? So these are the 4 questions that we base a lot of our work around throughout the entire year, going through different kind of cycle work through some of our units. How will we increase our instructional competency? This is where we really focus on our instructional model of HRS Marzano elements. And so as a part of this process, we do have a teacher evaluation and peer review. So there's 2 peer reviews, which would include like an observation or coaching, so kind of what we discuss in part of our coaching cycles, with an instructional coach. Or this could also include for someone that's in cycle for an evaluation from an administrator. The 3 evaluations by an administrator, this is for probationary teachers, this is required. And then there's also 3 informal observations required, and that's when we as licensed staff get to go into other classrooms and be able to observe. And this just kind of gives you an idea of what that cycle work is. A lot of times we end up meeting as a pre-conference, whether it be with the administrator or with our instructional coach. And then they come in to do the observation. And then we're able to wrap up and come back and have that discussion afterwards as well and process through some of the information. And then our performance pay incentive, the total is $1,300. The breakdown is below that. We have the building site goal. If that's met, that's $150. That goes to the licensed staff in the building. If it is not met, that goes into basically a pot that is specific to that building, so that they're able to then use for professional development throughout the year. Individual growth plan, that's our SMART goal. That's what we do or base a lot of our, like our Marzano work and things like that on as well. And then those observations, the PLC attendance and the cycle work is a lot of the paperwork that goes with that as well. This year for our SMART goals, I believe it was in the 50s last year. I can't remember exactly. I have 52% in my head, but I could be off by a percent or two. But 62% of our teachers met their SMART goals this year. And this is based on student achievement. This number can fluctuate. It's not necessarily one that increases or decreases on a trend. It's more so, it really depends on each licensed staff and what they're choosing for their goals and what they're targeting that year with their students. Of course, we like to see people that can meet their goals because that means that our students are doing good things too, but there's still a learning process within that. So even if they're not meeting it, it doesn't mean that learning's not happening. It means that they're just working and creating really some challenging goals for themselves, which is good. And here is our instructional model, which is the New Art and Science of Teaching Marzano elements that helps guide our work. This has become, I feel like, a real familiar staple by now in our buildings. You see them pretty much everywhere you go, which is great. Most of our staff, especially if we're not counting necessarily new staff, it might be newer to new staff, but Marzano is not necessarily new to education by any means, are very familiar, but becoming really well rehearsed in Marzano, I feel. That's something that I've noticed in terms of over the last several years that we've been a part of this. It really has brought us collectively together, and the conversations that happen have been really great and deep in terms of our focus. Here's some recommendations that we have for next year. It would be continuing the professional development for HRS level 2 and level 3, taking a look at that guaranteed and viable curriculum. A lot of that comes around in terms of our proficiency scales, which is really standards centered. And then we do have some movement forward that we would like to make with level 2 certification this coming year. The high school is planning to begin their process in July. Southwest is going to begin in January, and the elementaries will begin their processes in March. And some of these times have to do with when they certified in level 1 originally. Elementary is focusing on the recommitment to unit planning and cycle work. We'll continue with the 2 formal peer reviews that were listed before in observations, and utilizing that instructional coaching model. We really rely heavily on that feedback. Lots of great conversations that can happen when we have those instructional coaches coming into our classrooms, sometimes for one of these 2 peer observations, but I feel like we see it more often now where it's like, hey, can you just come into my classroom? I'm gonna try this thing. I know it's a little bit last minute, but would you mind giving me some feedback if you have time? And that's been happening a lot more. I really appreciate our instructional coaches and being able to utilize them like that. And then, of course, we incorporate, from HRS, we've really brought in those instructional rounds, which is part of that informal peer review process. So it kind of allows us time. Our instructional coaches set up different times throughout the year, several times throughout the year, where we have opportunities that we can sign up and then go and enter into other licensed teachers' classrooms, but at a short focus time that then you're able to like collaborate with a few other people that are within your group at that time and have discussions and hopefully gain some ideas usually and come out of there with something that you can use in your own classroom. It's really great to be able to have that. And then, of course, our performance pay remaining at $1,300 again for next year. Any questions for me so far?
Any questions? I'm about the role of peer reviewer. Is there professional development for
Yep,
teachers that
every year
choose
they
to go in
need to
that
take,
role?
yep, every year there needs to be, that's according to even QComp guiding principles and requirements, that our teacher leaders, in terms of instructional coaches, need to have some sort of training, is what they call it, but yes. And so this past year, what we did was we had a group come in and they were able to, we went kind of beyond our instructional coaches and brought in some of our teacher leaders as well in other positions to be able to have a day that they taught focused on adult learning and adult feedback. You know, we go through a lot of pedagogy that has to do with gearing towards students, but we also need to be able to help each other in our own aspect as well. So that was a really, really great professional development day that we had back in January. So there's a lot of positive feedback from that.
Anything else from the board?
The funding for this comes from the state.
Yes, yes.
Oh.
And that does not subtract the amount of.
No,
All right.
no, nor does it increase every year. It has stayed the
Right.
same for as long as I've known about it, I will say, which has been longer than I've been in Albert Lea even. Yep, yep,
You mentioned 62% of the teachers.
yes.
So does that mean that 38% did not get any kind of?
No, that just means that they didn't meet their goal. So whatever they set for their goal that year, mine was based around this year, we were looking at really closely at our standards. We've got new science standards, and so we're continually trying to add in some new units. So that was something that myself and my partner teacher had wanted to focus on, and so then we actually took one of the Marzano strategies to be able to help us focus towards that. So we made a SMART goal based off of that. And then use their assessments and their performance on that to decide if they're making our goal, I should say. Like, for instance, mine, in short form, I believe, is pretty much 80% of all sixth grade students, because both of my partner teacher and I together decided to go with the same goal. So we used the entire sixth grade would perform with an 80% or better on their assessments throughout the year, so.
Once when you put this framework into place annually, my sense of it is that it's an ongoing, continuous improvement of teaching and learning.
Yes,
And
yep.
you're adopting and modifying curriculum as needed based on individual performance too? It gets down to that level?
That really involves, adopting curriculum involves a little bit higher up in that, but we do have conversations about that, yes, definitely, and it's throughout this process, because we have instructional leadership teams in each of our buildings, which are, usually consist of our administrator, and then our instructional coach, and also the instructional team leaders of these CTs, collaborative teams that we call them in our buildings, and then we also at the district level have a learning team, which also consists of teacher leaders and administrators to be able to discuss some of these things, but.
You've used the language of continuous improvement. On the second bullet up there, she highlighted unit planning and cycle work. As part of that work at all levels, K-12, not just elementary, teachers are really working on answering those 4 critical questions to determine, based on our data and our assessments, are students meeting the expectations that we've set forward or not. So that language of continuous improvement really is happening with every unit planning that you do, so that you are monitoring how did students perform, did they meet the expectations or not, and then really being careful about adjusting that for the future, or are there pieces that I need to reteach and go back to make sure that they are meeting it? So yes, it is built in that way.
Yep.
Very dynamic.
Yeah, yep. And with some of that data, it's something that you can use, like Tanya had just said too, with the future. There's a lot of times I go back to my IGP, my individual growth plan, where all of this is recorded, and are able to go back with my partner teacher and say, here's what went well last year, here's what didn't. Remember, here's what we wanted to change for next year. If there's times where you don't always have time at the very end, when you know that there's those nuances that you want to make adjustments and shifts to, but it's not necessarily something you'll go back and reteach, but you want to make sure that you make that change for next year. We use that a lot, so very helpful.
Yeah, as I understand it, this program serves as a sort of vehicle to deliver a professional development that we would be doing anyways. Nowadays, it's the Marzano approach. So as I said, it serves as a vehicle to deliver something we'd be doing anyway.
Yeah.
And it piggybacks on that quite well.
Yeah, and really well organized, I must say. I feel like I do say this every year, but I come from a school prior to Albert Lee where we were trying to establish something, and we didn't have QComp in that sense. You know, there's a huge long line. If you were to get out of it, we would be well over 200 schools in a waiting list. So to be able to get back in, which is nearly, pretty much impossible. But trying to get our evaluation system established was tough, and there's a lot that you have to be able to make sure that you've got these requirements, embedded in there as well. And coming to Albert Lee, that was one of my favorite things, which originally, this is why I wanted to be in this position, is because it was inspiring to see the work that is established here and is happening. And so I really enjoy that and feel lucky to be a part of that here.
And I would echo that, is when it's implemented with integrity, I think that's what I've seen. That's where you grow as a professional, and having that collegial conversation, and that's what's happening with our teachers. So that's why it continues with the depth that it is.
All right, well, very good. Thank you very much for the update. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And next, we'll have the K-5 literacy adoption.
Before
Yeah.
Kathy leaves, I do just want to thank her in front of the board. As she mentioned on one of her slides, there are term limits. And Kathy has served us for 5 years as district ATPS coordinator. So I want to thank her for her service, and we move on to a new coordinator next year. So thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Kathy. All right. Good evening, Vice Chair Schindler, Superintendent Wagner, and directors. I am here to go over our K-5 literacy adoption, share with you some information regarding wit and wisdom. As you know, I have sat here with you many times, and you've heard me speak to the READ Act and speak to literacy initiatives in the state of Minnesota. And so just as a reminder, our primary READ Act goal is to have every Minnesota child reading at or above grade level every year, beginning in kindergarten, no longer using the language of read well by third grade. Also, the state of Minnesota is being very strategic, purposeful planning in making sure that we are folding in our multilingual learners and students receiving special education. You have also heard me share information on Tier 1 accelerated learning. And those of you that sit on the District Advisory Curriculum Committee have also seen that this information. And we did a really nice activity in our District Advisory Committee to look at each of these individual sentences and pull out the words that stood out to us. And so as you look at each of those sentences, we focused on high quality, evidence-based. We focused on words like engaging and challenging. we focused on words such as deeper understanding and progress. And so we have had groups of teachers go through the Minnesota MTSS process this year, and specifically our instructional coaches and resource specialists have also done training on Tier 1 accelerated learning. You heard Ms. Bauman speak to level 3 of Marzano being guaranteed and viable curriculum. We need to start at the Tier 1 instructional level. That's what the K-5 literacy adoption of Wit and Wisdom, that will be our primary focus in Tier 1 accelerated learning for this coming year. Darcy, will you click on the picture, please? And then the video.
Wit and Wisdom is a English language arts curriculum. Let's explore what that looks like. A wide body of research shows that when students know more, they can read more complex texts, learn more vocabulary, and write at higher levels. Each module builds students' knowledge on a specific topic. Let's take a look at some of the topics. As you can see, the grades K through 8 topics come from literature, history and social studies, science, and the arts. Students build knowledge of the topics by reading, discussing, and writing about the authentic, compelling texts in the curriculum. Let's dive deeper into a few of the topics and see how sets of texts work together to build students' knowledge. As this grade 1 example shows, some Wit and Wisdom modules build students' knowledge of literature and its universal themes and stories. Some modules build students' knowledge of science. In this grade 2 module, students learn about the human digestive system. Other modules build students' knowledge of the arts. In this grade 3 module, students learn about artists such as William Carlos Williams, Marian Anderson, Alvin Ailey, and Jackson Pollock. This is just one example of an art-focused module. All Wit and Wisdom modules include art as core and supplementary texts. Other modules build students' knowledge of historical periods, events, and people. In this grade 7 module, students learn about World War II and its effects on some Americans. Here is one example of a full year's topics and core texts. As you can see, grade 3 students read varied texts as they learn about science, history, social studies, and the arts. Some grade level topics you may already know about. Others might be unfamiliar. All we hope will be intriguing. As they build knowledge, students are also building their English language arts reading, writing, and oral communication skills. Lessons in Wit and Wisdom integrate skills. Students read, write, speak, listen, learn vocabulary, and study conventions as they read module texts and learn about the module topic. Wit and Wisdom students use writing and speaking to learn, and as they build their knowledge, they also build the skills to more effectively write and speak. For example, as they build knowledge of a topic, students might work with the same text to identify key details, discuss those details with their peers, define vocabulary, record evidence, and write sentences to communicate their learning. The curriculum's purposeful sequence builds students' learning within and across grades K through 8. Modules are designed to be taught in a specific order. Each builds on the previous in terms of routines, content knowledge, and skills. In Module 1, for example, students may learn to do a certain vocabulary activity that is a prerequisite for work in Module 2. Students may write a single paragraph in Module 1 and a full essay in Module 2. Across the grade levels, students purposefully build and deepen knowledge of topics and skills. For example, students students build skills as speakers and listeners. In grade 1, students work on responding to what others say. In grade 2, they learn to link what they say to what others say. In grade 3, they focus on how to agree and disagree respectfully. The integrated approach to English language arts means the Witten Wisdom classroom is a busy, lively place. We hope you will find that this knowledge-building, integrated approach helps all students achieve greatness.
And hit the black X. Thank you.
Okay, so as you saw in that video, really two key focuses there were knowledge building curriculum and the integrated approach. The Witten Wisdom curriculum really covers in depth those topics of science, history, social studies, art, and literature. While I think that visual of the cogs really visually represents how it integrates all pieces in reading, writing, listening, and speaking. And then there was also the visual of authentic texts. Kids are involved in authentic texts every day, which is different from what some of us have seen as traditional basal readers. So it's nice that kids get authentic hands-on text approaches. Thank you. Again, this is not new information to you. You have seen me share this information both here at the board table and also in board updates. One thing to note with Witten Wisdom is as the state of Minnesota was going through the approval process for approved curriculums for reimbursement, they looked at two types of curriculums, knowledge building curriculums such as Witten Wisdom and also comprehensive curriculums. A comprehensive curriculum will cover both strands of the reading rope, the word recognition strand at the top and the language comprehension strand at the bottom. Our district already had a foundational skills program in really great reading. As we looked at curriculum adoption, one of the things that was important for us to consider is what was the lift going to be for our teachers? What would the professional development requirements look like? What would they need to learn in order to successfully deliver the curriculum? Witten Wisdom did not having the foundational skills component allows us to focus on the language comprehension strand of the rope for instruction and professional development. Our teachers already have received the professional development in foundational skills programming. So we, paired with our letters training in K3, will continue the really great reading foundational skills curriculum and move towards Witten Wisdom for the knowledge building curriculum in language comprehension. Thank you.
Questions or comments?
Where are we at on the training now? How's that coming along? And I know it's waiting, but doing ahead and all this kind of stuff.
We have all of the training for Witten Wisdom planned out for school year 24-25. Training starts next week. June 12th is our first training day with principals and key instructional leaders like our MTSS literacy specialists and our instructional coaches. Next week, they'll do what's called launch. That is really planning out what does the vision for a successful implementation look like, and then they will help us strategically lay out milestones for year 1 and year 2 of the program. Later in July, we meet towards the end of July. We'll go through that same group of individuals. We'll have professional development called LEAD. LEAD will bring us to what will it look like to lead successful implementation. So now that we have the plan laid out, what will that look like? August 15th is the first day teachers will receive training. So K-5 buildings will receive training, 6 hours of training in implementation.
coming back one of the academy days, September 30th. That will be our first, they'll work in grade bands, K1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, and that will be called module and lesson study. You saw in the video how it laid out each of the 4 modules for every grade level. On September 30th, teachers will be working on how to do the comprehensive lesson planning. They call it lesson study, module and lesson study. And that is at the recommendation of Wit and Wisdom to do that approximately 6 weeks after you start the school year. What they didn't talk about in this video, but I can link in your board update, is what's called Module 0. Module 0 actually happens in your first 30 days. So that's kind of a launch too. So they'll be going through the launch in that first 6 weeks. And then again, that module lesson study will hit on September 30th. Additional professional development, there are also coaching sessions. So coaching sessions are planned. Each building will get 2 half-days, one in the fall and one in the spring, late winter actually, for coaching sessions where Wit and Wisdom implementation specialists come on site and follow our instructional coaches and our literacy specialists and help with some coaching of what the implementation is looking like in our buildings. So it is planned out for the whole year, ready to roll. Thank you for your question.
Angie?
With these changes between the READ Act and this new curriculum, how will students who have fallen behind in reading, how will they be handled and coached and brought back up?
Okay, so one piece, you saw my second slide there, really focusing on Tier 1 accelerated learning. We know that we have to get back to a solid core instructional program. We have been missing some of those components over the last few years. So that's step 1, is making sure we have a strong core Tier 1 programming. From there, using the 4 critical questions, using data to make database decisions. From there, we'll implement the Tier 2 interventions as needed based on the data. Each of our buildings will continue to be able to manage intervention model of some capacity. We still have time set aside in both reading and math for students to receive targeted interventions if they are exhibiting that. Another piece of the READ Act that I don't believe I've discussed here or in a board update is if students are behind, one of the requirements is that districts provide families with learning options at home. So that'll be built into our August communication with families based on their students' data.
And if I can add to that is, the curriculum is just a tool. So we're really supporting the development of our teachers through the letters and giving the strategies of actually teaching reading and those foundational skills. So that's where that letters training comes in as well. So this is the tool that was adopted, but it's really building capacity in our teachers.
Thank you. Any other questions for me?
Anything else? Okay.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Pursuant to Minnesota Statute Section 13D.05, Subdivision 3B, for confidential discussion with legal counsel regarding pending litigation. The next item on the agenda is a closed session. The Minnesota Meeting Law, Minnesota Statute Section 13D.05, Subdivision 3B, allows the school board to close the meeting to engage in attorney-client privilege discussions. The board seeks to meet with its attorney to obtain confidential legal advice related to the litigation of Hernandez versus Albert Lee Schools. During the closed meeting, the attorney will update the board on the status of the case and settlement discussions. There is a need for absolute confidentiality because of the district's position would be compromised if such discussions took place in public and could be overheard by adverse parties. It is in the district's best interest for the board to obtain legal guidance in a confidential setting to obtain or to maintain attorney-client privilege. I will thereby entertain a motion to close the meeting pursuant to the attorney-client privilege for the reasons that I have stated. Motion by Bruce. Second by Angie. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, we'll now move into closed session. All right, now that we are back into general session, I will entertain a motion to approve the settlement agreement.
So moved.
Motion by Dave. Second by Bruce. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. Opposed? All right, that motion carries. Now I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Neil? Second. Davey, thank you. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you very much, everyone.